Xbox have been dropping news left, right and centre so far this January, and it's really looking like a strong year so far for Team Green. Xbox also keep dropping some insane deals out of absolutely nowhere, so again, taking away from our usual sales video on a Wednesday, Xbox have now dropped 2 new sales which are live as of right now, and there are some fantastic deals for you to delve into. I do apologise once again for that backlog, as yes, it's definitely going to be growing once more, and I do apologise if I sound a little bit croaky, as I'm a little bit under the weather. Even so, and do remember, I will be doing our Xbox game giveaway, which will be coming this Wednesday. Just make sure to comment below and you'll automatically be entered. With that, let's just dive into the Xbox deals you need to grab as soon as possible. First up today, we have Alone in the Dark, and to me, this is kind of one game that needs way more attention. I would say that is a perfect survival horror game, not an action horror like many modern games out there. It more involves exploration, puzzle solving and survival. The combat isn't really that perfect, but it's adequate for the genre, but the Lovecraftian elements and story are very well executed. To me, the mainstream reviews were a little bit bizarre. There was certainly some graphical stuttering on the odd occasion, but otherwise it's an excellently told and a proper Lovecraftian horror story that plays like a modern survival horror game, and it calls back to its original, which really reinvented this genre. I enjoyed every moment of it and found its unlikely combination of cozy asylum adventure game with monstrous action survival dream sequences just what the genre really did need. It's now down by 45%, and I heavily recommend you check it out for this week. Outcast: A New Beginning drops you into a vibrant alien world and then actually lets you explore it at your very own pace without constantly pulling you back onto rails. I was a really big fan of the first game, and it ultimately pioneered the entire genre of just non-linear open world games. This is a really long-awaited sequel that sees Cutter Slade return to the spectacular alien world of Adelpha. He's been resurrected by the almighty Yods, and he is then returned to find the Talons enslaved, the world stripped of all of its natural resources, and his own past intertwining with the invading robot forces, and it's basically up to him to go on a mission and save the planet yet again. It has one of the best map designs on the Xbox marketplace at the moment, and it's just so nice to soar around the map with your jetpack, collect stuff, do trials, and then basically upgrade your guns with different parts and find all of these little quirky side missions. A good way to kind of describe this one is it's essentially AA Avatar, and if that's your jam, then that £17.50 price tag will be totally worth it. Well, the Sword and Fairy franchise might not be that well known internationally, especially on Xbox, but it's kind of regarded in China as one of the most iconic RPG series that's ever been made. I was really surprised to learn that this was an action RPG that leans heavily into that Chinese fantasy, and that alone makes it feel refreshingly different from the usual medieval settings that I delve into. The combat is very fast and flashy and surprisingly fluid once you get comfortable with it, and it looks to blend real-time strategy action with cinematic abilities and stylish boss fights. I also really like that the story isn't afraid to be emotional, dramatic or sincere, and it really fully commits to that tone. The environment's also pretty and colourful, and the soundtrack does a lot of work here, and the whole thing just feels really ambitious. At £14 is a very strong recommendation and a real highlight on this sales video today, simply because it's great to see this franchise on Xbox for a very great price point. If you are wanting to dive into an experience which is a fresh take on the beloved Darksiders franchise, then I highly recommend you put on your radar Darksiders Genesis. This, of course, as you can see and you're well aware on screen now, is a top-down action RPG, and it lets you play as both War and Strife, battling through hordes of demons and angels in a quest to uncover a conspiracy that was threatening the balance of the entire universe. It's got very fast-paced combat, some great co-op multiplayer, and it has a real focus on its exploration as well, and Genesis sort of brought a new perspective to the series while staying true to its own roots. As someone who loved the likes of Darksiders 2, I was always quite skeptical of a sort of isometric single-player game within this franchise, but strangely, I kind of preferred it to the traditional third-person view, which is certainly something I never expected. At £9 is a great deal for fans of action RPGs and the Darksiders universe for this week. Endling Extinction Forever is a really beautiful yet heartbreaking survival adventure that follows the last mother fox on Earth that's trying to protect her cubs in a collapsing ecosystem. The game blends stealth, exploration and light resource management, as you essentially have to guide your family through a hostile world filled with traps, predators and environmental hazards. The emotional weight of this journey really does hit hard, with stunning hand-drawn visual styles and a minimalist soundtrack that just amplifies that overall atmosphere. There's also choices here that really do matter, and each of the losses feels deeply personal, making for such a great story-driven experience that lingers long after those credits roll. I actually played this one when it was available as part of Game Pass, but to be honest, looking at the store price with it being 85% off at just under £4 is the lowest price I've seen before, and it's a must-play if you like these sort of emotional, narrative-driven experiences. I know that Biomutant never really lived up to its expectations upon its release, and I kind of have to agree, but now that its asking price is less than £10, it becomes one I do highly recommend. It is an open-world, post-apocalyptic kung fu RPG with a very unique martial arts style combat system, allowing you to mix melee, shooting, and mutant ability action. The story also centers around a plague that's essentially ruining the land, and the Tree of Life is bleeding death from its roots. The tribes will stand divided, so your job is to ultimately unite them together and save the world in a little bit of a cliche story. The gun and melee combat honestly feels great here. The art direction is pretty gorgeous as well. The anthropomorphic creatures are an instant win for me. I hate how panned this game was upon its release, as it's not inherently a bad game, but it's certainly a shame to see the game was practically abandoned upon its launch due to that negative feedback. After such a glorious showing of the brand new Fable at the Xbox Developer Direct a few days back now, I suspect that many of you are either clamoring for more Fable or just want to revisit the old-time classics. Well, in some great news, my absolute favourite entry within the series, Fable II, is officially on sale this week at its lowest price yet within the Xbox Store, and you can grab it now for just £4.94. If you're unfamiliar, the plot will kick off with a tragic event that sets your character on a path to heroism. You will get to explore various regions of Albion, engage in different quests, and then make moral choices that affect your character's development and the world around them. It's so hard for me to kind of explain why this game is so good, but truth be told, becoming a landlord, becoming evil, and then jacking up the rent of your different houses is great, especially seeing how the NPCs really react. Of course, it's still going to be a little bit cheaper to grab a physical copy for the 360, but I still recommend it, especially at this low price points. Chronos Before the Ashes is a game that I only decided to delve into within the last sort of 5 years or so, and is one that I really did have a blast with. It comes from the same studio behind the Remnant games, and it kind of works as a prequel, but instead of guns and ranged combat, is very traditional in a Souls-like capability. So you think things like swords, shields, and outrageous looking maces, but it's not actually as difficult, so I always recommend it as a good stepping stone into that Souls-like genre. There's also a pretty heavy adventure game element to it. Puzzles are fairly similar to the old Resident Evil games, and a few were very cool and actually quite original. I do have to admit, I did get stuck a few times here and there, but I always managed to figure it out without resorting to a guide, which was great to see. All in all, it's definitely worth that sale price quite easily, especially if you love these sort of old school action adventure games or want to expand your Remnant lore. Not so much if you're a Souls-like player though, especially if you're looking for a similar game to something like Elden Ring. An Xbox exclusive which still goes heavily under the radar in my opinion is ReCore, and you probably already know about it as I actually have the big collector's edition statue which is usually visible in all of my live streams. If you're unfamiliar with this one, you will be playing as Jewel, a lone scavenger trying to piece together a broken planet with the help of her robotic companions. It's got a little bit of everything to be honest, from fast-paced combat, some light platforming, even dungeon crawling, and then clever puzzle solving. The best part overall though just has to be your robot allies. They're not just sidekicks or filler, they're actually part of the world's mechanics as well, with each of them bringing their own unique abilities to help you explore and fight within different ways. It is safe to say that although it did have quite a rocky launch, the definitive edition which I'm highlighting has smoothed out that overall experience and made it into something pretty special. It's still one that gets heavily overlooked as I mentioned, and for just £3.74 it's totally worth grabbing for this week. On the subject of live streams though, I never really shout about it here on the channel, but I will be live streaming a ton of new games before their Xbox releases this year, and this will be here on YouTube alongside my new Twitch channel. If you do want to check it out and pop into these live streams, then make sure to drop me a follow or subscribe, as it'll be massively appreciated. But yeah, definitely get excited as I have some huge stuff coming your way, and as Xbox gamers, you certainly won't want to miss it. Now, this next game is normally a pretty mid-tier release, but it's down to $11.24, and to be honest, it's just straight up dumb fun in the best way possible, and for that low price point I think it's totally worth it. Even though it didn't review that well across the board, it's still a fun time, and many, including myself, have really enjoyed it for what it was. South Park Snow Day really ditched that RPG format of the previous games, which is a bit of a weird direction to go, but it throws us into a chaotic 3D action game with court brawling, and it still contains all that crude humour you kind of expect in a TV show. It's very fast, silly, and honestly quite a blast. The snow-covered setting combined with those absurd absurd abilities actually had me laughing way more than I expected. Like I said, just don't go diving into this one expecting anything deep within any singular area. Just go in with some good vibes and laughs, and you'll have no doubt that you'll really enjoy this one. I definitely wouldn't recommend getting any sort of digital deluxe edition or anything higher than the base edition, as it doesn't really add anything, and the base game sale is totally worth it on itself. Desperados 3 is another game I highly recommend, and is a tactical stealth game that turns every level into a puzzle that you slowly untangle. It contains a band of misfit psychopaths who find each other in the dusty wilds of the Old West, and then proceed to jovially butcher their way to a kill count higher than most catastrophic natural disasters. Guns, poisons, traps, dynamite, they've kind of got it all, and a pun and a joke to go with it as well. Seriously though, it's a great game. However, the store page has a real-time tactics tag, and honestly that is pretty misleading for the overall experience. Instead, you'll be spending a huge amount of time crouched in bushes just waiting for patrols or analysing vision cones until you can execute a perfect strategy, but if you screw up, you're definitely not going to have a chance to really deal with the consequences. The graphics are also pretty fantastic across the board, with every level feeling unique and thematically so appropriate. It really is underrated, and this price is utterly ridiculous for such a quality experience. I know it's a little bit old compared to the others on this list today, and also can be a bit messy, rough, and sometimes frustrating, but that's why I do really love the original State of Decay. This is a game that really shook up the zombie genre at its time, and that was due to us not actually being the hero. It was actually about keeping people alive when everything goes really wrong. You'll have to help your band of survivors as they get tired, make mistakes, panic, and die permanently if you mess up. There's no sort of safety net, and losing someone you've spent hours building up actually hurts. I really loved this one back in the day with just how unpredictable it felt, as one bad supply run really did snowball into a disaster that reshapes your entire community. It's certainly not as polished as State of Decay 2, but it has a raw identity that still kind of holds up to this day. For £3, it's absurd value, and it's a great way to understand why the State of Decay games are so beloved, especially before number 3 arrives hopefully sometime within the next couple of years. Fade to Silence is a harsh, snowbound survival action game that truly makes you feel the cruelty of a frozen world. Managing stuff like stamina, temperature, and limited resources while exploring the white wasteland creates constant tension, and the overall atmosphere is very heavy and immersive. The action combat itself is quite enjoyable, with a lot of weighty moments that fit the survival theme. However, the difficulty can get quite high, and beginners out there may find it a little bit too unforgiving. From what I remember, the backpack capacity can also be quite limited, and it does really force frequent inventory management, which can be a little bit frustrating from time to time. Unfortunately, the multiplayer mode also suffers from a few bugs here and there, which does kind of significantly affect the overall experience. I've actually not cleared the game myself yet, but it does have some strong survival and action elements, and even with a few of those woes, this is the lowest price it's ever been, and totally worth that cost of admission. Surprisingly enough, you may remember me mentioning that I picked up Boti Byteland Overclocked in mid-2025, and it's one of those cheerful surprises I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I really did. It's a 3D platformer that takes you into a bright digital universe packed with zany movement mechanics, charming robot characters, and clean level design that feels like a modern nod to the golden age of platformers. What made it really work well for me is just how fluid the controls are, so stuff like bouncing, gliding, and boosting through cyberspace feels utterly great. There's also a solid variety of gameplay as well, from minigames to puzzle sections, and it never outstays its welcome for too long. If you're looking for a light-hearted, nostalgic break from the usual gritty releases that isn't too long in its playtime, then it's definitely a perfect pick. It's now at a low price of just £9.20, and I can't believe it's gone this low, especially as it didn't release too many years back now. This next game is one that rewards sticking with it, as SpellForce Conquest of Eo really starts off quietly, almost deceptively simple, but then it gradually opens up into a deep strategy experience built around long-term planning. In this one, you're playing as a mage expanding influence by researching your spells, crafting magical items, and then shaping that world over time. And what I really enjoyed is just how flexible it feels, as you'll be constantly experimenting, discovering some new combinations, and adapting your strategy as situations change. It can honestly feel overwhelming early on, but once the systems start connecting, it does become incredibly absorbing, and I definitely have to say to you, stick with it. It isn't about quick wins like other strategy games, it's about building power slowly and intelligently, and then ultimately being the winner. At just under 12 quid, it's a great recommendation if you're a strategy fan, and rounds off a solid week for the Xbox Store sales. Remember as well to smash that like button if you enjoyed this video today, and subscribe for more Xbox content every single day. Whilst here though, check out the video on screen now, as I did cover some of the huge Fable news that you need to know that did occur over the past week.